Jordan stepped into Luminu, the most exclusive luxury boutique in downtown Manhattan, his eyes widening at the gleaming displays of watches, jewelry, and designer accessories. The 17-year-old had saved up for months from his part-time job to buy himself something special for his upcoming graduation. What he didn't know was that this ordinary shopping trip was about to change his life. The store was nearly empty on this Tuesday afternoon, just a few wealthy-looking older customers browsing quietly. Jordan had dressed for the occasion in his nicest clothes: dark jeans, a crisp button-down shirt, and the designer sneakers his father had given him for his birthday. He'd even gotten a fresh haircut the day before. This was his first time in such a high-end store, and he wanted to look the part. As Jordan moved toward a display of watches, he noticed a tall, thin man in an impeccable suit watching him. The man, Richard Wells, according to his name tag, was the store manager. Richard's gaze followed Jordan's every move, his expression growing increasingly suspicious. When Jordan paused to admire a particularly elegant timepiece, Richard appeared at his side almost immediately. "Can I help you?" Richard asked, his tone clipped and cold. "Yes, actually," Jordan replied with a smile, trying to hide his nervousness. "I'm interested in seeing some of your watches. The Celestial Collection, if possible." Richard raised an eyebrow. "The Celestial Collection starts at $20,000. He looked Jordan up and down slowly. "Are you sure you're in the right store?" Jordan felt his face grow hot. "Yes, I'm sure. I've been saving up." Richard gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "Well, we don't typically remove items from the case unless there's a serious intent to purchase. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the department stores downtown. They have some nice, affordable options." A couple nearby glanced over, and Jordan felt his embarrassment deepen, but he stood his ground. "I'd still like to see the Celestial Collection, please." With a dramatic sigh, Richard reluctantly unlocked the case. As he did, he called out to a security guard across the store. "Anthony, could you come over here, please? We need some additional assistance." The security guard moved to stand nearby, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Jordan. By now, everyone in the store was watching. Richard placed a watch on the counter, keeping his hand firmly on it. "This is the most basic model. Again, it's $20,000. His voice was louder now, clearly meant for the other customers to hear. "I'm sure that's beyond your means, but you're welcome to look. From a distance." A middle-aged woman browsing nearby frowned at Richard's behavior and moved away uncomfortably. An older gentleman shook his head slightly but said nothing. "May I try it on?" Jordan asked, his voice steady despite his humiliation. Richard laughed. "I don't think that's necessary. We need to be careful with our merchandise." Then, lowering his voice but still loud enough for others to hear, he added, "We've had some issues with theft recently. If you understand what I'm saying." Jordan understood exactly what Richard was implying. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone, opening it to his banking app. "I have the money, sir. I've been saving for this." Richard glanced at the phone and smirked. "Anyone can Photoshop a banking app these days. Look, I think we both know you're just wasting my time. Why don't you come back with your parents? If they can afford something like this, that is." A few customers were now openly watching the interaction, some with disapproval, others with uncomfortable expressions. Jordan noticed a woman discreetly recording the exchange on her phone. "Maybe I'll check out some other stores," Jordan said quietly, his dignity intact despite the public humiliation. As Jordan turned to leave, Richard called after him. "That's probably best. We have a certain clientele here. Not everyone fits in." Jordan walked out with his head held high, but once outside, he leaned against the building and took several deep breaths, his eyes stung with unshed tears of anger and embarrassment. He'd experienced prejudice before, but never so blatantly, never so publicly. He pulled out his phone and started recording a video of himself, still standing in front of the store. His voice was quiet but determined as he recounted what had just happened. "I wasn't going to say anything, but people need to know how places like this treat people like me. All I wanted was to buy a watch." As he finished recording, a notification appeared on his screen, a message from his father. "How's the shopping going? Find anything you like?" Jordan stared at the message for a long moment. His father, who had worked so hard to give him every opportunity in life, who had taught him to always stand up for himself while remaining respectful. His father, who most people had no idea was one of the richest men in America, he typed back, "Not exactly.
Heading home now.
I'll tell you about it when I see you. Jordan put his phone away and started walking toward the subway station. He couldn't know that his next conversation with his father would set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the lives of many others. The luxury store behind him, with its gleaming windows and exclusive merchandise, had no idea what was coming either, or who they had just turned away. The autumn sun was setting as Jordan made his way home, casting long shadows across the city streets. Tomorrow would be a very different day for everyone involved. But for now, Jordan just wanted to get home and try to forget the sting of being judged not by his character or his wallet, but by the color of his skin. The Williams family home sat on a quiet, tree-lined street in the suburbs outside the city. It was large but not ostentatious. Howard Williams had always preferred to keep his wealth relatively private. As Jordan walked through the front door, the smell of his father's famous chili filled the house. "Is that you, Jordan?" Howard called from the kitchen. "Yeah, Dad," Jordan replied, dropping his backpack in the hallway and heading toward the kitchen. Howard Williams stood at the stove, stirring a large pot. At 49, he had the same tall, athletic build as his son, though his short hair was starting to show flecks of gray. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans. Nothing about his appearance suggested he was the founder and CEO of Williams Global Investments, with a personal net worth of nearly $5 billion. "Perfect timing," Howard said, glancing up with a smile that quickly faded when he saw the expression on his son's face. "What happened? You look upset." Jordan shrugged, trying to appear casual as he grabbed a glass of water. "Nothing major." Howard turned down the heat on the stove and wiped his hands on a kitchen towel. "Come on now. I know that look." "What's going on?" Jordan hesitated. His father had taught him to handle his own problems, to be strong and independent. But he'd also taught him that there was strength in telling the truth, especially in the face of injustice. "I went to Lumineux today," Jordan said finally. "The luxury store? Did you find a graduation gift for yourself?" Howard asked, setting the table for dinner. Jordan sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. "Didn't get the chance. The manager basically kicked me out." Howard stopped what he was doing, his full attention now on his son. "What do you mean?" As they ate dinner, Jordan told his father everything. The way the manager had followed him around the store, the comments about whether he was in the right place the security guard called over to watch him, the suggestion that he might be a thief. "I recorded a video right after I left," Jordan said, pulling out his phone. "I was just going to post it online, but then I thought maybe I shouldn't." Howard watched the video, his expression growing increasingly serious. Jordan had never seen that particular look in his father's eyes before. It was calm on the surface, but there was something else underneath, something cold and determined. "Did you get the manager's name?" Howard asked, his voice surprisingly quiet. "Richard Wells. It was on his name tag." Howard nodded slowly, taking another bite of chili. "You know, when I was about your age, something similar happened to me. It was a different time, but some things haven't changed much." "What did you do?" Jordan asked. "Nothing at the time. I didn't have the power to do anything." Howard set down his spoon. "But things are different now." After dinner, Jordan went upstairs to work on a school assignment. He could hear his father making phone calls in his home office, the low murmur of his voice continuing late into the evening. It wasn't unusual. Howard often worked late, but something about tonight felt different. Around 11, there was a knock on Jordan's bedroom door. "Come in," Jordan called, looking up from his laptop. Howard entered, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. He handed one to Jordan and sat on the edge of the bed. "I made some calls," Howard said. "Lumineux is owned by a larger company called Prestige Retail Group. They've been approaching our investment firm recently, looking for funding to expand their chain of luxury stores." Jordan took a sip of his hot chocolate. "Okay. I've had my team pull the customer complaint records for all their stores. Turns out there's been a pattern of incidents similar to what happened to you, mostly involving young people of color." "That doesn't surprise me," Jordan said, remembering the way Richard had looked at him. Howard nodded grimly. "The company has been burying these complaints. Nothing ever happens. No consequences. So what are you going to do?" Jordan asked, sensing his father had something planned. "First, I want to make sure your account is verified. My assistant Diane will visit the store tomorrow undercover. She'll observe how this Richard Wells treats other customers." Jordan knew Diane well. She'd worked for his father for years and was like family to them. She was also extremely observant and detail-oriented. "And then?" Jordan prompted. Howard took a long sip of his hot chocolate before answering. "Then we'll see. I believe in giving people a chance to make things right, but I also believe in consequences. Dad, you don't have to do anything." "I'm fine, really," Jordan said, though the memory of the humiliation still stung. Howard looked at his son with a mix of pride and sadness. "This isn't just about you, Jordan. How many other kids have walked into that store and been treated the same way? Kids who don't have a father who can do something about it?" Jordan nodded slowly, understanding. His father had always taught him that with great privilege came great responsibility. "Get some rest," Howard said, standing up. "And don't worry about this anymore. I'll handle it." The next morning, Jordan headed off to school while Howard went to his downtown office. Throughout the day, Jordan couldn't help checking his phone between classes, wondering what was happening with his father's investigation. Around lunchtime, he received a text from Howard. "Diane visited the store. Confirmed everything you said. Richard Wells is still at it, working on next steps." After school, Jordan had basketball practice, which helped take his mind off the situation. By the time he got home, it was past 7. He found his father in the living room, surrounded by papers and his laptop open on the coffee table. "Hey," Jordan said, dropping his gym bag. "Any updates?" Howard looked up, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "Quite a few, actually. Come sit down." Jordan joined his father on the couch. On the screen was a complex financial document with Prestige Retail Group's logo at the top. "So, remember how I said they've been approaching our firm for funding?" Howard began. "Well, it turns out we already hold a significant position in their company through various investment vehicles. I never paid much attention to this particular holding before now." "What does that mean?" Jordan asked. "It means," Howard said, closing the laptop, "that by tomorrow morning, Williams Global Investments will be the majority shareholder in Prestige Retail Group, and Lumineux will effectively be our store." Jordan's eyes widened. "You're buying the whole company?" "Just because of what happened to me." Howard shook his head. "No, not just because of that. It's actually a sound business investment. Their financial fundamentals are strong, but their corporate culture is toxic, and that's going to hurt them in the long run. We're just accelerating the inevitable change in leadership." "So what happens tomorrow?" Jordan asked. Howard checked his watch. "Well, right about now, Richard Wells is receiving an email informing him of a special store inspection tomorrow morning before opening hours. He's being told it's a routine visit from corporate leadership." Howard smiled slightly. "He just doesn't know which corporate leadership will be showing up." Jordan couldn't help but feel a flutter of anticipation. His father wasn't one for public confrontations or dramatic scenes, but when he did decide to make a point, he did it thoroughly. "Do you want to come with me?" Howard asked unexpectedly. Jordan thought about it for a moment. Part of him wanted to see Richard Wells's face when he realized who Jordan's father was. But another part of him, the better part, knew that wouldn't solve anything. "No," Jordan said finally. "This isn't about getting back at him personally. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, right?" Howard's face filled with pride. "Right, that's exactly right." He squeezed Jordan's shoulder. "I've raised a better man than I am." "I doubt that," Jordan said with a small laugh. "But thanks." As Jordan headed upstairs to shower and start his homework, he couldn't help wondering what tomorrow would bring. His father was a quiet force, not given to grand gestures or public displays of power. But when Howard Williams decided to act, the results were always significant. Whatever happened at Lumineux tomorrow would be more than just about one rude store manager. It would be about changing a system that allowed such behavior to thrive. The morning sun had barely risen over the city skyline when Diane Chen arrived at Lumineux. She wore a simple but elegant pantsuit and carried a designer handbag, looking every bit the part of a corporate executive. Her actual role as Howard Williams's chief of staff made her more than qualified to assess the situation. She'd been with Williams Global Investments for 15 years and was one of Howard's most trusted advisors. Diane had visited the store yesterday as a regular customer, dressed in casual clothes, and had experienced firsthand how Richard Wells treated people he deemed unworthy of Lumineux's exclusive atmosphere. Now, she was back with a very different agenda. She checked her watch, 7:45, and the store wouldn't open to the public for another hour and 15 minutes. But Richard had been instructed to arrive early for what he believed was a routine corporate visit. Right on time, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb and Howard Williams stepped out. Unlike Diane, he was dressed casually in dark jeans and a simple navy blazer. No tie, no flashy accessories. Despite his billions, Howard had never been one for ostentatious displays of wealth. "Good morning," Diane greeted him with a professional nod. "Everything is in place. The legal team arrived 5 minutes ago and is waiting around the corner. They'll come in once you text them." "Thank you, Diane," Howard said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of determination. "Any sign of Mr. Wells?" "He arrived 30 minutes ago. Seems quite nervous about the corporate visit. I don't think he has any idea what's really happening." Howard nodded, his expression giving nothing away. "Let's not keep him waiting then." Together they walked to the store's entrance. A nervous-looking security guard opened the door immediately. "Mr. Wells is expecting you," the guard said, clearly having been instructed to watch for their arrival. Inside, Luminu was eerily quiet without customers. The display cases gleamed under perfect lighting, thousands of dollars of luxury merchandise arranged with precision. Richard Wells stood in the center of the showroom, hands clasped behind his back, a practiced smile on his face. Several other employees stood nearby, all looking tense. "Welcome to Luminu," Richard began with a professional smile. "I'm Richard Wells, the store manager. We're honored to have corporate leadership visit our flagship location." Diane stepped forward. "Mr. Wells, I'd like to introduce you to Howard Williams, CEO of Williams Global Investments." Richard's smile faltered slightly in confusion. This clearly wasn't the corporate representative he'd been expecting. Williams Global Investments. I'm afraid there must be some mistake. We're part of Prestige Retail Group." Howard extended his hand. "No mistake, Mr. Wells, as of 6 a.m. this morning, Williams Global Investments has become the majority shareholder in Prestige Retail Group. In effect, I'm your new boss." The color drained from Richard's face as he automatically shook Howard's hand. I wasn't informed of any ownership changes." "It happened rather quickly," Howard said mildly. "Now perhaps we could speak somewhere private. I have some matters to discuss regarding how this store is managed." Richard led them to his office at the back of the store, visibly unsettled but maintaining a professional demeanor. Once inside, Howard declined the offered seat and instead remained standing, looking around the office with calm interest. "Mr. Wells," Howard began, "I want to be direct with you. Yesterday, my 17-year-old son Jordan came to this store to purchase a watch from your Celestial collection. He had saved for months for this purchase. Instead of being treated like a valued customer, he was racially profiled, humiliated, and essentially forced to leave." Richard's expression shifted from confusion to shock, and then to a carefully controlled neutral mask. "Sir, I can assure you that Luminu has strict policies against discrimination of any kind." "Perhaps there was a misunderstanding." Howard raised a hand, cutting him off. "There was no misunderstanding. My son recorded his account immediately after leaving the store. Furthermore, my chief of staff, Ms. Chen here, visited your store yesterday afternoon and witnessed similar behavior toward other customers of color." Richard glanced at Diane, who met his gaze steadily. Recognition flickered in his eyes as he remembered her visit from the previous day, when he had largely ignored her until she expressed interest in one of the most expensive items in the store. "Additionally," Howard continued, "I've had my legal team review all customer complaints filed against this location over the past 3 years. There's a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior, particularly directed at young people of color." Richard swallowed hard. "Mr. Williams, I can explain." "I'm not here for explanations, Mr. Wells," Howard said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel. "I'm here to inform you of changes that will be taking place, effective immediately." He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. Within moments, there was a knock at the office door. Diane opened it to reveal a team of 4 people in business attire, Howard's legal and corporate team. "These individuals will be overseeing a complete restructuring of Luminu," Howard explained as they entered. "The store will be closed for the next 3 months for renovations and staff retraining. And you, Mr. Wells, are being relieved of your position, effective immediately." Richard's professional facade crumbled. "You can't do this. I've managed this store for 8 years. Our profits are the highest in the company." "Profits aren't everything, Mr. Wells," Howard replied. "How we treat people matters. How we conduct business matters. The culture you've created here is unacceptable and, frankly, a liability to the company. Richard's face flushed with anger. This is about your son, isn't it? Look, if I had known he was your son, that's exactly the problem. Howard cut in, his voice sharper now. You shouldn't treat anyone differently based on who their father is, or what they look like, or how old they are. Every person who walks through that door deserves the same respect. One of the legal team members stepped forward, handing Richard an envelope. This contains the terms of your separation from the company, including a non-disclosure agreement. You'll find the severance package is quite generous provided you sign today. Richard took the envelope with trembling hands. This isn't fair. You're ruining my career over one incident. It wasn't one incident, Diane interjected. We have documented at least 27 formal complaints that align with what happened to Jordan. And those are just the customers who took the time to file complaints. Howard checked his watch. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings, Mr. Wells. Security will escort you out afterward. As Richard stood frozen in disbelief, Howard turned to leave the office. At the door, he paused and looked back. You know, my son didn't want me to do anything. He's used to people like you underestimating him, judging him by his appearance rather than his character. He's stronger than I was at his age. Howard's expression softened slightly. I hope you use this as an opportunity to reflect and grow, Mr. Wells. We all deserve second chances, but they have to be earned. With that, Howard left the office, Diane and the legal team following. In the main showroom, the other employees watched with wide eyes as Howard addressed them briefly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Howard Williams, CEO of Williams Global Investments, which has just acquired Prestige Retail Group. I want to assure you that while there will be changes coming, most of your jobs are secure. This store will be closed for the next 3 months for renovations and a complete restructuring of operations. During this time, you'll continue to receive your full salaries and benefits while participating in a comprehensive training program. The employees exchanged nervous glances, but there was also a sense of relief among some of them, particularly the younger staff members who had witnessed Richard's behavior over the years. As Howard finished his brief address, his phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. How'd it go with Richard? Howard smiled slightly as he typed back. He's no longer employed at Lumineux. I'll tell you more when I get home. Outside the store, Howard found Diane waiting for him on the sidewalk. The morning sun was now fully above the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city streets. The team will handle everything from here, she said. The PR department is preparing a statement about the store closure and renovation, framing it as an exciting new direction for the brand, without mentioning the specific incident. Howard nodded. Good. I don't want Jordan's name associated with this publicly. He's already dealt with enough. What are your plans for the store? Diane asked as they walked toward Howard's waiting car. Howard looked back at the gleaming storefront of Lumineux, with its exclusive displays and air of inaccessibility. Something different. Something better. He smiled thoughtfully. Jordan has some ideas, actually. I think it's time I started listening more to his generation. As the car pulled away from the curb, Howard felt a weight lift from his shoulders. What had happened to Jordan couldn't be undone, but perhaps it could be transformed into something positive, not just for their family, but for many others. Money and power, Howard had always believed, were only truly valuable when used to create meaningful change. And change was definitely coming to Lumineux. The news about Lumineux's sudden closure spread quickly through the luxury retail world. Speculation ran wild. Some industry insiders claimed the store was being sold. Others suggested financial troubles, and a few even hinted at some kind of scandal. The official press release from Williams Global Investments mentioned only renovations and strategic restructuring, giving little away about the true reasons behind the decision. For the first few weeks after the confrontation with Richard Wells, Howard Williams kept a low profile, focusing on the legal aspects of the acquisition and the plans for the store's future. At home, he and Jordan spent evenings discussing ideas for what Lumineux could become. It shouldn't just be another luxury store, Jordan said one night as they sat in the kitchen, sketches and notes spread across the table. There are already plenty of those. Howard nodded, sipping his coffee. I agree, but it still needs to be profitable. That's the reality of business, what if it was still high-end but more inclusive, Jordan suggested. Like the same quality products but without the snobbery? That's a start, Howard replied. But I think we can push further. What if we used part of the space for something completely different? This conversation continued over several weeks, with Jordan bringing in some of his friends to contribute ideas. Howard was impressed by their creativity and perspective, recognizing that these young people understood something about community and belonging that many traditional retailers had missed. Meanwhile, the retail industry continued to buzz with rumors. The mystery deepened when construction crews arrived at Lumineux and completely gutted the interior. Heavy curtains went up over the windows, hiding the transformation taking place inside. Security guards stood at the entrances, turning away curious onlookers and journalists trying to get a peek. 6 weeks after the closure, Howard received an unexpected call. It was a journalist from Business Today, one of the country's most respected financial publications. "Mr. Williams, I'm working on a story about Lumineux's closure and your acquisition of Prestige Retail Group," the journalist explained. "We've received some information suggesting the acquisition was triggered by a personal incident involving discrimination at the store. Would you care to comment?" Howard paused, considering his response carefully. "I'd prefer not to discuss the specific reasons behind our business decisions. However, I will say that Williams Global Investments is committed to ethical business practices in all our ventures. We have a source claiming your teenage son was racially profiled at the store the day before you initiated the acquisition. Is there any truth to that?" Howard sighed. He had known this might happen eventually. "Listen, this is not just a personal matter. My company has been looking at Prestige Retail Group for some time as a potential acquisition. What I will say is that during our due diligence, we uncovered concerning patterns in how certain stores were operated, and those findings accelerated our decision-making process." The journalist pressed further, but Howard remained firm in his refusal to make the story about Jordan specifically. After ending the call, he immediately went to find his son. Jordan was in his room working on homework. Howard knocked and entered, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The story about what happened at Lumineux might be going public," Howard explained. "A journalist just called me asking questions. I didn't confirm anything specific, but these stories have a way of coming out." Jordan looked up from his textbook. "I figured something like this might happen." "It's okay, Dad. I'm not ashamed of what happened." "Are you sure? Once this gets out, there might be a lot of attention on you." "Not all of it positive," Jordan shrugged. "If it helps change things, maybe that's worth it. But I don't want to be the center of the story. This isn't just about me. It's about all the people who've been treated that way and didn't have a billionaire dad to buy the store." Howard smiled at his son's wisdom. "You're right, and that gives me an idea." The next day, Howard called an emergency meeting with his PR team and executives. By the end of the day, they had developed a new approach, one that would address the coming media attention head-on, but with a broader focus. 2 days later, Howard gave an exclusive interview to Business Today. Instead of denying the incident with his son, he acknowledged it as one example among many that had revealed a systemic problem within the company he had acquired. "Yes, my son experienced discrimination at Lumineux," Howard confirmed in the interview. "But when we investigated further, we found dozens of similar complaints that had been ignored by previous management. This isn't about one incident or one person. It's about recognizing a pattern of behavior that has no place in modern business." Howard then unveiled the plans for the transformed Lumineux space. Instead of reopening as a traditional luxury retail store, the location would be divided into 3 distinct sections: a high-end retail space with a new inclusive approach to customer service, a business incubator for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups, and a community event space that would host workshops, classes, and networking events. "We're calling it the Nexus," Howard explained, "because it's about connecting people, ideas, and opportunities." The interview caused a sensation. Some business analysts criticized Howard for allowing personal matters to influence business as decisions. Others praised the innovative approach to transforming a traditional retail space. But what really captured public attention was the announcement of a new foundation that would be launched alongside the Nexus. The Opportunity Foundation will focus specifically on addressing discriminatory practices in retail and business, Howard explained. It will provide legal support for individuals who experience discrimination, fund research into best practices, and offer grants to companies committed to creating more inclusive environments. What Howard didn't mention in the interview was that the foundation had been Jordan's idea. The teenager had insisted that changing one store wasn't enough. They needed to address the larger systemic issues. The media attention continued to build over the following weeks. Jordan received interview requests from major news outlets, which he declined, preferring to stay out of the spotlight. However, he did agree to help his father's team develop the criteria for the business incubator program that would occupy part of the Nexus. 3 months after Luminou's closure, the construction barriers finally came down. The storefront had been completely transformed. Gone was the intimidating, exclusive atmosphere of the old luxury boutique. In its place was a modern, welcoming facade with large windows that allowed passers-by to see inside. The night before the grand opening, Howard took Jordan for a private tour of the completed space. The retail section still featured high-end merchandise, but displayed in a more approachable way. The business incubator occupied the entire second floor, with modern workspaces and meeting rooms. The community area in the back of the ground floor featured comfortable seating, a small cafe, and a flexible event space. "What do you think?" Howard asked as they stood in the center of the main room. Jordan looked around, taking it all in. "It's amazing, Dad. It doesn't even feel like the same place." "That's the point," Howard replied with a smile. "It's not just about changing the appearance, it's about changing the energy, the purpose, the whole approach." As they were leaving, Jordan stopped by the main entrance where a small plaque had been installed beside the door. It read simply, "The Nexus, where everyone belongs." "You know," Jordan said quietly, "when I walked out of here 3 months ago, I felt so small, so powerless. I never imagined something like this could come from that moment." Howard put his arm around his son's shoulders. "That's the thing about injustice, Jordan. Sometimes it takes something personal to open our eyes to the bigger picture. The real test is what we do with that awareness." The following morning, the Nexus opened its doors to the public. The line of people waiting to enter stretched around the block. A mix of curious shoppers, young entrepreneurs interested in the incubator program, and media representatives covering the opening. Inside, Howard and his team greeted visitors and explained the concept behind the Nexus. Jordan stayed in the background, watching with quiet pride as people explored the space, their faces reflecting surprise and approval at what they found. A young woman approached Howard as he stood near the entrance. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams? I just wanted to say thank you. I used to work at Luminou and, well, let's just say it wasn't always a pleasant environment. This is like a breath of fresh air." Howard smiled. "Thank you for saying that. We're trying to create something different here." "You've succeeded," she replied. "It feels like a place where everyone is welcome." As Howard glanced across the room, he caught Jordan's eye. His son gave him a small thumbs up, and Howard felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with business success. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important changes come from the most painful experiences. What had happened to Jordan had been wrong, but the response to that wrong, that was something they could both be proud of. The transformation of Luminou into the Nexus wasn't just about a store. It was about showing that even in the world of high-end retail, dignity and respect should never be exclusive commodities. 6 months after the Nexus opened its doors, the transformed space had become one of the most talked-about business ventures in the city. The retail section was thriving, attracting a diverse clientele who appreciated both the quality merchandise and the welcoming atmosphere. The business incubator upstairs had already launched 3 successful startups, and the community space hosted events nearly every evening, from networking mixers to workshops on financial literacy. Jordan, now 18 and preparing to leave for college in the fall, had become more involved than he'd initially planned. What started as occasional visits to check on the place had evolved into a regular role helping to mentor young entrepreneurs in the incubator program. Though still reluctant to be in the spotlight, he had found his voice in one-on-one conversations with aspiring business owners who faced the same barriers he had encountered. One warm spring afternoon, Jordan sat in the community space with a high school student named Anthony who had developed an innovative app for connecting local artists with neighborhood businesses wanting to showcase artwork. "The idea is solid," Jordan told him, reviewing the business plan. "But have you thought about how to make it sustainable beyond the initial launch?" Anthony nodded eagerly. "That's where I'm stuck. I know how to build the platform, but the business side is new to me." Jordan smiled. "That's exactly why we created this space. Let me introduce you to our business advisor tomorrow. She can help you develop the financial projections you'll need." As they continued talking, Jordan noticed a familiar face enter the Nexus. It was Richard Wells, the former manager of Lumineux. Jordan hadn't seen him since that day in the store 6 months ago, and for a moment he felt a rush of the old humiliation. But then something unexpected happened. Richard spotted him and walked directly over. "Excuse me," Richard said, looking uncomfortable but determined. "You're Howard Williams' son, aren't you?" Jordan nodded cautiously. "Yes, I am." Anthony, sensing the tension, excused himself and moved to another table. Richard hesitated, then spoke. "I've been wanting to apologize to you for a long time. The way I treated you that day, there's no excuse for it. I was wrong." Jordan hadn't expected this. He studied Richard's face, looking for signs of insincerity but finding none. "Thank you for saying that. After I lost my job, I was angry for a long time," Richard continued. "I blamed you, your father, everyone but myself. But eventually I had to face the truth. The problems at Lumineux didn't start with you. You were just the customer who happened to have a father powerful enough to do something about it." Jordan gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Do you want to sit down?" Richard seemed surprised by the offer, but accepted. "I've been watching what's happened here," he said, looking around the Nexus. "It's remarkable. Nothing like the old store." "That was the point," Jordan replied. "We wanted to create something completely different. You succeeded." Richard paused. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months, taking some courses on diversity and inclusion, working with a therapist to understand why I behaved the way I did for so many years." He shook his head. "It's not easy facing your own prejudices." Jordan considered this. "No, I imagine it's not. But recognizing them is the first step, right?" "Right," Richard smiled sadly. "I'm not telling you this to ask for my job back or anything like that. I just needed you to know that what happened changed me. For the better, I think." Before Jordan could respond, he noticed his father enter the community space. Howard spotted them immediately, his expression shifting from surprise to concern as he recognized Richard. He made his way over quickly. "Jordan, everything okay here?" Howard asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Everything's fine, Dad," Jordan assured him. "Mr. Wells was just apologizing for what happened." Howard looked at Richard, who stood up respectfully. "Mr. Williams, thank you for not pressing charges over those customer complaints. The severance package was more than fair, and it gave me time to really think about my life and career." Howard nodded slowly. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow from their mistakes." "I've taken that chance seriously," Richard said. "I'm actually working with a non-profit now, helping to develop anti-discrimination training programs for retail businesses." He smiled slightly. "My years of doing things wrong gave me some insight into what needs to change." Howard seemed impressed despite himself. "That's commendable." An awkward silence fell, which Jordan broke by asking, "How are you finding it?" "The non-profit work. It pays a fraction of what I made at Lumineux," Richard admitted. "But it's fulfilling in a way retail management never was. I'm using my experience to help prevent others from making the same mistakes." Howard and Jordan exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then Howard made a decision. "The Opportunity Foundation is looking to expand its training programs," he said. "If you're interested, I could put you in touch with the director. Your perspective might be valuable." Richard looked genuinely moved. "I would appreciate that very much, Mr. Williams." After exchanging contact information, Richard thanked them both again and left. Jordan watched him go, feeling a complex mix of emotions. "You okay?" Howard asked, sitting in the chair Richard had vacated. "Yeah," Jordan said thoughtfully. "I didn't expect that. An actual apology." "People can surprise you sometimes," Howard replied. "For better or worse." Jordan nodded, then changed the subject. "Did you come to find me, or were you just checking on the place?" "Actually, I have news," Howard said, brightening. "The first Nexus franchise is ready to launch in Atlanta. The location is perfect, right in a neighborhood that really needs the investment. If it works there, we're looking at Chicago and Detroit next." This had been their plan all along, to take the Nexus concept nationwide, creating spaces in cities across the country where luxury retail could coexist with community development and entrepreneurship. What had started as a response to discrimination had evolved into a business model that was both profitable and purposeful. "That's great, Dad," Jordan said enthusiastically. When do we visit the Atlanta site? Next weekend if you can miss a day of school on Friday. I'll make it work, Jordan promised. Later that evening, as they drove home, Howard glanced at his son. You know, I've been thinking about something. That college essay you wrote about your experience at Luminu and what came after. Have you considered sharing it more widely? Jordan had written about the incident for his college applications, describing not just what had happened, but how it had changed his perspective on privilege, responsibility, and creating change. The essay had helped secure his acceptance to several top universities. I don't know, Jordan said hesitantly. It's pretty personal. It is, Howard agreed. But it's also powerful. There are a lot of young people out there who face discrimination and don't see a way to fight back. Your story might give them hope. Not because they all have fathers who can buy businesses, but because it shows that speaking up can lead to real change. Jordan considered this. Maybe I could adapt it into something for the Nexus website? Not focusing on me so much, but on the larger issues and how we're trying to address them. I think that would be perfect, Howard said with approval. As they pulled into their driveway, Jordan looked at the house that had always represented safety and privilege to him. He thought about how different his life was from so many others. His age, how a painful incident that might have crushed someone else's spirit had instead become the catalyst for a movement. You know what's funny, Dad? He said suddenly. If Richard hadn't been so terrible to me that day, none of this would have happened. The Nexus, the foundation, the franchises, none of it. Howard turned off the engine and looked at his son. That's often how change works, Jordan. Something breaks, and in fixing it, we build something better than what was there before. 2 weeks later, Jordan's essay was published on the Nexus website under the title, When Doors Close, How Discrimination Opened a New Path. The piece carefully avoided naming Richard or detailing the exact incident, focusing instead on the broader issues and the positive changes that had resulted. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Emails poured in from young people sharing similar experiences, from business owners asking how they could improve their practices, and from community organizations wanting to partner with the Nexus and the Opportunity Foundation. As Jordan prepared for graduation and his upcoming move to college, he reflected on how differently things had turned out from what he'd expected that day at Luminu. He had walked into the store wanting to buy a watch, a simple object to mark an achievement. Instead, he had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that even painful experiences could be transformed into positive change, not just for himself but for many others. The Nexus was more than a business now. It was becoming a movement, spreading from city to city. And it had all started because a store manager had looked at a teenager and seen only his skin color, not knowing that sometimes discrimination creates its own worst enemy, a person determined to ensure that others won't face the same treatment. As Jordan's story spread, the Nexus became not just a place to shop, learn, and connect, but a symbol of what was possible when privilege was used to combat prejudice instead of perpetuating it. The luxury watches in the display cases were beautiful, but the real luxury on offer was something more valuable. Dignity, opportunity, and respect for everyone who walked through the doors.